Number one story of the week, Evan, comes from Indy. Colts make the right call, get Anthony Richardson back in the saddle. And honestly, I was critical of the move of benching Anthony Richardson, but it honestly did seem like the time away did Anthony Richardson well. This was one of the best overall games I've seen him play in his NFL career, which, by the way, that was only his 11th career start. But still, I thought one of the best games that he's played in the NFL, 20 of 30 for 272 with a touchdown, only took 2 sacks, and he ran for 2 touchdowns, running controlled, running around the goal line, kind of like Josh Allen does. So, Evan, what do you think of Anthony Richardson's return to the saddle, and any other Colts thoughts here?
Yeah, so the Colts got a lot of criticism for the way that they handled the Anthony Richardson situation, but sometimes young players just need a break. I mean, we've seen that with other quarterbacks historically, and this might end up working out for the best. Now they got the Lions on deck, and that could get ugly. But in this particular game, I agree with you. I think Anthony Richardson might have had his best game as a passer against the Jets. The Colts really struggled to run the ball in this game, was not something I necessarily expected against the Jets, so you can kind of run on. And they had the vast majority of their success through the air. Josh Downs was excellent. Anthony Richardson was awesome throwing the ball over the middle and downfield. They designed a ton of runs for him. So I really like the way that they crafted the offense around Anthony Richardson, and obviously the way that he responded. He wound up with, I don't even know how many fantasy points, something like 35 or something. We talked about him as a DFS tournament play. Didn't necessarily trust his floor, but on the Friday show, we talked about him as a DFS tournament play, and he delivered.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, played a bunch of A-Rich in that spot. I'm in a league, regular fantasy league, where I have Josh Allen as my quarterback, and somebody dropped Anthony Richardson, which a couple weeks ago, which was totally viable. And I'm happy to run Anthony Richardson here as my streamer in for Josh Allen. This game against the Colts that's coming up, Colts Lions, 50.5 total, Evan. I mean, there's not that many games in the NFL now that get totals above 50. This Anthony Richardson versus Jared Goff game will be one of them on Sunday. I do think that it hurts Jonathan Taylor, right? Like, he only gets 2 targets in this game. He also loses 2 rushing touchdowns to Anthony Richardson. I also think that it hurts Michael Pittman. I also think that it hurts A.D. Mitchell, who, by the way, barely even played it. A.D. Mitchell only 5 routes on 32 dropbacks with Michael Pittman back. Alec Pierce ran 27 routes. But yeah, like, you can definitely throw on the Lions, but it's still tough for me to trust, guys. Obviously, Downs is my favorite, but I do think it hurts JT. And if A.D. Mitchell ever gets in there, I think it hurts him a bit as well. Let's go to the Giants. Giants were on a bye, but the expected big news does happen. After 6 long years, the Daniel Jones era is over. I thought a pretty easy, no-brainer decision for the Giants to pull the plug here. Daniel Jones had a $23 million injury guarantee in his contract. In other words, they can now move on cheaper from Daniel Jones this offseason. If he got hurt in these meaningless games down the stretch, they wouldn't be able to do that. Also, I think they're more likely to lose games. Like, I know people hate Daniel Jones. He's obviously not very good, but I still think they're more likely to lose games down the stretch. Better for their draft pick. And let's say by some miracle, they actually play well down the stretch. Well, then maybe the coach and the GM can save their jobs by saying, see, look, this was all Daniel Jones' fault anyways. So, Evan, what was your reaction to the Giants' decision to go ahead and pull the plug on Danny Dimes?
Well, we knew that this was coming. We talked about this last Tuesday. It was like virtually 100% chance that the Giants were going to bench Daniel Jones. The next question became, were they going to go with Drew Lock or Tommy DeVito? And Drew Lock, in his opportunities, going back to even training camp, preseason, just has really not looked good at any point. So they're going with Tommy DeVito, who has a little bit of a cult following. And I guess the theory is that they think that more, there's obviously a really big Italian contingent in the city of New York, and they can get more fans to the stadium to buy concessions. I don't know, but it's kind of funny, but we'll see how it goes. I mean, Tommy DeVito, we saw last year, he had a little bit of a run. It wasn't really because of him, and then that petered out, and that's probably what will happen again this year.
I mean, Tommy DeVito is a 26-year-old former undrafted free agent out of Illinois. As Evan said, he made 6 starts last year. He only topped 200 passing yards in one of those games. The sack rate that Tommy DeVito had last year was like unfathomable. Like I actually had to like triple check it. I was like, there's no way this guy took this many sacks in just 6 starts, but he did. I think the reason that they're going to him is for the fans, not just Italian, but I mean, everybody likes this dude. It's a great story, you know? And so I agree. It's probably for the fans. I'm curious what you think about Neighbors and Tyrone Tracy the rest of the way here. Obviously, I liked both of them a lot with Daniel Jones. I'm a little bit more skeptical now. What do you think about Neighbors and Tracy rest of
I'm
season?
more skeptical. It's disappointing for Malik Neighbors. I think this could be a tough stretch run for him. I don't think the Giants are going to want, to give Tommy DeVito that many dropbacks. And I don't know, what his completion. I wouldn't have high expectations for his completion rate. As you mentioned, he had 200-yard passing game out of 6 chances last season. I think Tyrone Tracy is going to be all right. RB2 flex the rest of the way. All he has to do is maintain that role that he basically took away from Devin Singletary. We've seen he's got big playability. He can play in the passing game. Worried about, the catch rate and that kind of stuff with Malik Neighbors.
Yeah, I will say Tommy DeVito is going to run into a pretty soft schedule here. Bucks, Cowboys, Saints, Ravens, Falcons, Colts. I mean, that's pretty soft. I don't think Tommy DeVito is necessarily capable of capitalizing on it, but it won't hurt that he has super soft schedule.
That is something, at least something that we can hang our hat on for Malik Neighbors, because that's a lot of good matchups.
For sure. Number 3 story of the week comes from Cincinnati. Really painful loss here for the Bengals. I mean, defense in the first half was awful. They got absolutely shredded. They're down 24-6 at halftime. Second half, defense steps up and Burrow caught fire. And this T. Higgins stuff, I mean, T. Higgins, I know it's frustrating. I know it's annoying that he's banged up all the time, misses so many games. But when he's been out there this year, he has been absolutely unreal. They come all the way back behind T, who finishes with 9 catches, 148 yards, and a touchdown. Jamar Chase adds 2 touchdowns to himself. T. Higgins going to get a massive bag in free agency. Massive bag in free agency. As it stands now, though, Evan, like a lot of our projection stuff is like, who's going to lead the game in receiving yards, Jamar Chase or T. Higgins? We don't have it that far apart right now. So, Evan, what do you think about the T. Higgins stuff and any more Bengals thoughts?
Yeah, T. Higgins, when he's healthy, is an above-the-rim vertical playmaker and a true number 1 receiver. And like you mentioned, he's going to get paid like that. And when the Bengals have both these dudes rolling, I mean, their offense, they can compete with anybody. Add in Chase Brown, who has been an absolute workhorse in the absence of Zach Moss. I mean, they traded for Khalil Herbert. Did he even get the ball on Sunday? No, he didn't
Nope.
get the ball on Sunday. Chase Brown has been an absolute workhorse, just like he was in his final season at Illinois. He's running a ton of routes. He's making big plays. He had 5 catches for 57 yards in this one. And I mean, I still think that he has a chance to be a true league winner down the stretch.
Yeah, I mean, his role is not that different than Christian McCaffrey's role right now, which is absolutely insane to say. But Chase Brown, in the 3 games since Zach Moss went down, Chase Brown, 81 touches. Every other running back on the Bengals, 0. I mean, they traded for Khalil Herbert. He botched that exchange a couple weeks ago and haven't seen him since. Yeah, in the 6 games that T and Jamar Chase have played together this season, T. Higgins has 58 targets. Jamar Chase has 49. Obviously, I don't think that T. Higgins is better than Jamar Chase. I absolutely love Jamar Chase, but the way that teams are playing right now, T. Higgins is not that far off in terms of production. One thought I had on the Bengals. They're like 10% to make the playoffs now. If they lose another game, they're going to be down to like 0%. And at that point, I start to get worried about guys like T. Higgins, who is entering summer free agency. Is Burrow going to play through stuff? Is Chase Brown going to play through stuff? So I just want to put that on the radar. They're pretty close to being eliminated from the playoffs already, which is sad because I do think that they're so fun and so fun to watch. And I love playing them in DFS, obviously.
Do you think that Zach Taylor's job could be hanging in the balance?
I don't think I don't think Zach Taylor does a great job, but I don't think they'll fire him for this season per se. But yeah, everything's on the table for them. I mean, really disappointing year, really. Number 4 story comes from Denver, big story is Bo Nix, man. I mean, it's not like his rookie year numbers are completely wild. It's not like he's overly impressive. Stroud's numbers last year, especially his underlying numbers, were so much better. But considering what's around Bo Nix in terms of weapons, he's having a pretty strong rookie year. He is now fantasy's quarterback 9. And also he has the Broncos at 6-5. Easily could be 7-4 with a win over the Chiefs, if not for that blocked field goal. So, Evan, really impressive game for Bo Nix in this win over the Falcons. What's your latest take on Nix and any of their Broncos thoughts?
Yeah, and I did not have Bo Nix, throwing for 4 touchdowns or over 300 yards or anything like that. But we knew that this was a really good spot for him at home against a Falcons defense that cannot rush the passer. The Broncos have been great in pass protection, and Bo Nix had a 4-yard ADOT in this game, and he took 3 hits all game on 34 dropbacks. He got sacked once. So he's working with a clean pocket, so much high percentage stuff. And this was one of your best calls of the preseason, that Bo Nix was going to be a legit fantasy factor. A lot of people were down on Bo Nix as a prospect. I mean,
Yeah.
I remember some analysts that I respect comparing him to Taylor Heineke. Who was really high on Bo Nix was Mike Renner,
Yeah.
who at one point compared him to Tony Romo. So Renner, who we have on annually to break down draft prospects, he's crushing that so far. And I think Sean Payton is crushing it as a guy who his first year in Denver was not promising. I was like, man, has this guy lost it? Clearly, he has not lost it. And the Broncos are like, what are they, 6-5 now?
Yep.
One of the best defenses in the league, and one of the most improving offenses. They keep getting better offensively.
Yeah, I think people will call Bo Nix a system quarterback, right? I wouldn't call that an insult. I mean, you could call Drew Brees a system quarterback if you really wanted to, right? I mean, I think that Bo Nix can execute this offense, but from fantasy, the big thing for me is dude runs, and he has the ability at least to have these big passing games. And so when you put that combination
And
together,
he's in a very passer-friendly scheme and
yeah.
and everything else. So
Other note I had on Denver was this running back stuff. Ton of Audric Estime hype last week. We talked about him a bunch last week as well. Evan, I thought he was worth a pickup. I thought people were going too far on it, but not because I thought he'd get chumped by Javonte Williams. I thought people were going too far because Estime isn't that explosive. He's not going to play in the pass game that much. How many touchdowns are going to be available? Turned out they started Javonte Williams in this game, and Javonte Williams is the feature back. Much of Estime's usage came in garbage time. So it's just a reminder that with Sean Payton, like no matter what he says, no matter what it looks like the week before, you can pop up at any time and be like, oh, Audric Estime is the feature back. Oh, no. Javonte Williams is the feature back. Oh, no. Vele is out there for every snap. Oh, no. Marvin Mims is going to play something. You know what I mean? And this is like every week with Denver stuff. So yeah, Evan, any thoughts on the backfield now after we saw Javonte get back in the mix?
it just seems very clear to me that this is a hot hand situation. And by the way, there's a ton of an annoying number of hot hand situations around the league right now. I think it's just clearly a hot hand situation, right? They gave Javonte Williams the first drive. They gave Estime the second drive. And it went 3 and out. And then it was kind of Javonte Williams the rest of the way until things got out of hand. Jaleel McLaughlin has a defined role, and that's not going away. So it's a 3-man hot hand backfield. And that's going to be really, really frustrating week to week when we're trying to make fantasy lineup decisions.
Absolutely. One thing about the Broncos is they have a chance to stay hot here. Raiders this week, then Browns, then Colts in their next 3 games, and also week 17 fantasy championship play the Bengals, which is a pretty good spot also. So yeah, things certainly looking up for the Broncos. Fifth story of the week comes from Chicago. This was their first game since Shane Fraudron was fired, and they lose on a blocked short field goal. I was looking for changes that Thomas Brown would make. And one change that we saw was more running, right? More design runs for Caleb Williams. He ended up with 9 carries for 70 yards. Roshan gets in the mix for 10 carries. DeAndre Swift carried it 14 times, but still, Caleb took 3 sacks, didn't throw a touchdown. I didn't really see any big changes in the passing game. Evan, what do you think of the first game of the post-Fraudron era?
Yeah, I actually thought that there were a number of changes throughout. Another one was that Cole Kmet played like almost 100% of the snaps. You remember Shane Fraudron's buddy was Gerald Everett.
Yeah.
He shouldn't be a part of the offense anymore. I mean, and Cole Kmet had 3 for 42, I believe. Yeah, caught all 3 of his targets for 42 yards. Cole Kmet can play. I mean, they're paying him, a decent amount of money. Like, he needs to be the guy the rest of the way. And they upped their usage of 3 receiver sets. So now they're really running that more McVay-ish style of offense with the 3 receivers: Keenan Allen, Rome Odunze, and DJ Moore, and then Cole Kmet as the locked-in tight end. So more along the line. They also used more pre-snap motion. Shane Fraudrin was not using that very much, and Thomas Brown did. You mentioned the Roschon stuff. They used him in a lot of short yardage situations, but DeAndre Swift remained the lead back. I thought that they made a number of changes. Caleb, all right, I'm going to address a YouTube comment again.
Oh, no.
Last week, okay, all right, so we had those 3 games that the Bears played before their bye. And I have said that Caleb Williams was playing really good football at that time. And then all of a sudden during the bye, the bottom fell out on the team really as a whole, and Caleb was not playing well. We had a YouTube commenter last week talking about how, no, Caleb did not play well before the bye. He's not a fit for the NFL, which I don't even know what that means. But if you have already determined that Caleb Williams through 9 games is not a fit for the NFL, then, I mean, I don't think that your opinion can be taken seriously. That's just a totally unserious comment. And by the way, Caleb made some sick throws in this game. They put his athleticism to use, as you mentioned, on design runs. I'm not worried about Caleb Williams. Certainly not worried about him being a fit for the NFL. Okay. I thought that this was a really promising effort. It sucks, I guess, that they lost. Although, they're firing their coach anyways. Losses are actually kind of good for the Bears as a team right now. But I thought Caleb looked great in the first game under Thomas Brown. So I'm often very skeptical of when, you make an OC change on the fly. Are they really going to make any changes that matter? And I think Thomas Brown actually did make changes that mattered. And we saw Caleb play one of his best games of the season.
Okay. Yeah. I, for one, am shocked that there was an unhinged YouTube comment. I never would have suspected that in my entire life. Anyways, on the Roschon stuff, opportunities inside the 10-yard line. They've been using Roschon even before Fraudrin was fired around the goal line. Some opportunities inside the 10 were Roschon 3, Swift 1. Total opportunities in this game were Swift 16, Roschon 11. And routes actually surprised me. Swift 18 routes, Roschon 12. So, DeAndre Swift is still ahead. I'm still okay with DeAndre Swift. But when I was like playing him in DFS like a few weeks ago, I mean, he had a pure workhorse role, pure workhorse role. And I don't think we're going to see that now that Roschon has kind of emerged and have this role. All right. Let's go to the NFC. We'll start with the Arizona Cardinals. Cardinals were on a bye in week 11. They will come out of it, Evan, as the heavy favorite to win the NFC West, the Arizona Cardinals. After San Francisco's loss, I think the Cardinals are now like minus 250 or something like that to win the NFC West. They play at Seattle on Sunday in a really nice game environment for Kyler Murray and James Conner. Evan, any thoughts on Cardinals as they come out of their bye?
Not a ton, obviously, because they're coming off the off week, but they've won 4 games in a row. They really started to hit their stride offensively. You remember early in the season, we came in with really high hopes for their offense. They were kind of disappointed, a little shaky to begin, but they've really started to play really well offensively. They've also played well defensively. I don't know. I don't know. I wouldn't bet him at minus 250 to win the NFC West, though. I'd probably can you get plus money on San Francisco to win the division?
Oh, big time. Yeah. San Francisco's like a dog now to make the playoffs, but
they have a really tough schedule. San Francisco has a really tough schedule.
Couple more notes from you on the Cardinals. I do think touchdown luck is going to flip on Trey McBride. Trey McBride has played great this year. He's caught 49 balls, somehow has scored 0 touchdowns. Like, there's going to be a regression there on Trey McBride. And also, remember, Cardinals get Patriots, Panthers, Rams in the fantasy playoffs. I mean, those are 3 really soft spots in the fantasy playoffs there for the Cardinals. Let's go to Atlanta. Predictable, really tough spot for the Falcons, right? Like, Kirk Cousins outside against a very good defense. They go to Denver and they get smoked. His lack of mobility against teams that blitz a lot is a problem for sure. We ended up watching Michael Penix clean up in garbage time here. I'm I don't want to say throw it out, but like it was so expected to me that Cousins would play poorly here that I'm like almost throwing it out in my head. Evan, what'd you think of Falcons game in Denver?
Yeah, just his lack of mobility combined with the Broncos' ability to get pressure on him, that was never going to go well. It's also a reminder that, at one point I questioned the validity of the Broncos' defense, and I'm definitely taking the L on that. They're really, really good. They're fast at linebacker. They can get pressure with four. They've got their cornerback trio really at this point is playing really well. It's not just Patrick Surtain, although he might be, the best player and best defensive player in the NFL. But I mean, they're kind of low key like a complete team at this point. The Falcons now are going on a bye, so I guess they'll have some time here to figure things out. Raheem Morris publicly questioned his team's effort
Yeah.
after this game, and that's not usually something that you want to see.
Yeah. Scary thing for me was Darnell Mooney came into this game with like a small Achilles issue. He was not on the final report. And then during this game, he pulled up with a hamstring injury. Now, they're calling it day to day. They say that it's minor. I just hate these hamstring things, man. I mean, Nico Collins, you remember at first he was okay. Then he was out for like 7 weeks. We'll get to him here more in a minute. But I really hope Darnell Mooney ends up being okay because, again, just like Rashee Rice, Rashid Shaheed, Chris Godwin, Nico Collins. I mean, I can't take another one of the best wide receiver picks going down. So hopefully Darnell Mooney is going to be okay here.
Last time is that Tyler Algier barely played at all in this
Yeah.
game, and that was for a variety of reasons. Number one, because he doesn't play when the Falcons are behind. That's Bijan's role. And then at the end, they put in Jace McClellan because the game was such a blowout. My guess
Yeah.
that after the bye, Algier will go back to his usual role, but just probably just a blip.
Agreed. Let's go to the Panthers. So Panthers were on a bye. They will come out of it for an absolutely impossible spot. They play the Chiefs as the Chiefs come off their first loss of the season. Big news from Carolina, though, is we are expected to finally get a look at Jonathan Brooks this week. We'll likely project him for, a reasonable role behind Chuba Hubbard, probably something around 6 to 9 touches or so. But either way, I'm excited to get a look at Jonathan Brooks. And it's not ideal for Chuba Hubbard, but Miles Sanders is going to be out for this game anyways. And I still think Chuba Hubbard's a pretty good bet for 15 plus touches going forward. Evan, any thoughts on Panthers as they come out of their bye?
Other notes that I had were just Adam Thielen should be ready to go here.
Yeah.
He's been out since week 3. And then I don't know that they have a ton of incentive to play him at a full time clip, but I'm sure that he'll jump back in the rotation.
Yeah.
And then Dave Canales, the Panthers head coach, confirmed that Bryce Young is going to remain the starter, but he also said that they're evaluating the starting quarterback week to week. I think it'll be Bryce Young the rest of the way, but I just thought that was interesting that he didn't fully commit to Bryce Young the rest of the way.
Yeah. I mean, I would be shocked if they didn't start him every game the rest of the way. I mean, there's absolutely no reason to put Andy Dalton in there. Cowboys. So Cooper Rush last night threw for 354 yards against a pretty good Texans defense, but Dallas still managed just 10 points. They also lost Jake Ferguson to a concussion early on, but generally, I just thought it was good for like the overall tenor of the fantasy environment that at least we know Cooper Rush can throw for 354 yards. I mean, after that Eagles game, people were like, "Oh my god." There were crazy. There was 150 to 1 out there on Cooper Rush to throw for 350 yards in that game. 151. I mean, absolutely insane.
Why didn't you tell us, Adam?
Well, some guy brought it up to me in our props Discord, and we made it like 60 to 1. And I was like, yeah, we make this around 60 to 1. You can bet this if you want. It's hard for me to see Cooper Rush getting 350 yards. I hope that guy took it. Anyways, Evan, what'd you think of Cooper Rush and the Cowboys last night?
Yeah, they made some changes because they benched Jalen Brooks.
Yeah.
And then they went with more of Kavonte Turpin, who, by the way, is shot out of a freaking cannon. I don't know if he can run routes or anything like that. He was the USFL MVP.
He was absolutely unstoppable in the USFL. Unstoppable. Yeah.
He's made some big plays in the NFL. And then they had they lost Ferguson at tight end, and they went with Luke Schoonmaker and Brevin Spann Ford at tight end. And those guys both had like decent days. I mean, a lot of people are going to have decent days when your quarterback throws for 354.
Mm-hmm.
And then they used Ryan Flournoy as their number 3 receiver, and he didn't really do much. I don't know, man. You know, they also lost Tyler Guyton, their starting left tackle, to a shoulder injury. So and after the game, or on Monday on his radio show, Jerry Jones was like, we're Mike McCarthy's not going to get fired for the rest of the season, and I think that Cooper Rush should continue to start. But I also think, I personally also think that at some point they'll reach a point where it's like it doesn't make sense to play Cooper Rush anymore, and they got to put in Trey Lance.
They gave him a 4th-round pick. You're not going to put the kid in the games? I
Yeah.
mean, it's crazy. But yeah, good for CD. You know, I know there's a lot of people with CD holding CD bags out there. You know, it's at least good that we know Cooper Rush can do this. You know, I was shaky there for a minute. They play at Commanders next.
One other note is Rico Dowdle. You know, and Mike McCarthy had really been talking him up going into the game. He struggled in the first half, and they started mixing in like Deuce Vaughn and
Zeke.
Yeah, Zeke, and like, you know, I don't know how truly committed they are to Rico Dowdle, even though I think that he's easily looked the best of all their RBs.
Okay, let's go to Detroit. I mean, this almost wasn't fair. I mean, this Lions team against the lame duck Jaguars, they could do whatever they want. And what they wanted to do was obviously they ran the ball, and they ran the ball dominantly. But they used it, I thought, sharply as a chance to get Jared Goff back on track. I mean, Jared Goff had been struggling the previous couple games. In this one, 24 of 29 for 412 yards, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. Literal perfect game here for Jared Goff. You get the big Amon-Ra game. You get the big JMO game. And I know Dinks talked about this a lot. The JMO splits with and without Sam Laporta are meaningful. It's super small sample. I don't know how sticky that'll be. But JMO again went off here with Laporta out. Evan, any thoughts on Lions blowout of the Jaguars?
Yeah, we talked about on Friday the possibility that coming off that 5 interception week 10 game, that the Lions, you know, I mean, the Lions, like Dan Campbell, Ben Johnson, they're like players, coaches. I mean, we've seen them trying to get touchdowns to offensive linemen. And relative to the score in the game, the Lions' pass rate was like way above expectation. Because I mean, they freaking won 52-6. I actually had them scoring 40 in my score prediction in the matchups column, and I still underestimated it. But I think that they did do that. I think that they kind of went out of their way to get. They knew that they could do whatever they wanted against the Jaguars. They did, and they let Jared Goff kind of slinging around the yard. Amon-Ra St. Brown really hasn't had a ton of big games this season. They got him one. They got Jamison Williams one, as you mentioned. Jahmyr Gibbs, I saw your tweet, freak. And I mean, that guy is another guy who's shot out of a cannon.
Unreal.
But yeah, I mean, they did whatever they wanted, and it was really not surprising.
Yeah. They were throwing the ball, to Evan's point. They were up like 30 points in the fourth quarter and still throwing, you know? And yeah, I mean, that broke the slate for DFS. I will say, you know, we've talked about this going back to the preseason. They play so many dome games, man. Dome game against the Colts this week. Dome game against the Bears. Dome game against the Packers. Dome game against the Bills. Like a lot of dome games. And then in the fantasy playoffs, they play 2 outdoor games, but they do play San Francisco, which could turn into a bit of a shootout there in fantasy championship week. Packers come out of their bye. Everyone's healthy. They squeeze out this 2019 win in Chicago on that blocked field goal as time expired. Packers only ran 43 plays in this entire game. Jordan Love only dropped back 20 times. That was a season low here for Jordan Love. Evan, what do you think of the Packers getting lucky to win this game over the Bears?
Yeah, weird stuff can happen to teams coming off the bye, and I think that we generally tend to be optimistic about teams coming off the bye because we think, oh, you know, they had the time to rest and whatever. You know, I'm never really surprised at this point at the outcome of teams that are coming off the bye, but I do think that Jordan Love looked healthy. I thought that Josh Jacobs looked healthy. Both those guys have been battling injuries going into the off week. The big story to me was Christian Watson, and I have not looked at his snap
Yeah,
stuff yet because
he
my
ran
expectation was that he was going to split with Dontavian Wicks.
he ran 15 routes. Dobbs ran
Okay.
18. Reed
Okay.
ran 12, and Wicks ran 6. So it was 15-6 Watson over Wicks.
Okay. And those are really low numbers because, again, Jordan Love only dropped back to pass, what'd you say, 20
20
times?
times, yeah.
Right. So, hey, 15 out of 20 is pretty good for Christian Watson. I mean, he's been a
Yeah.
player that they like to limit. He made a monster catch. Well, it was a debatable catch at the end, though, 60 yards. And he's averaging like 2.4 yards per route run or something crazy. I mean, he's got a chance to be a difference maker, I think, down the stretch. As long as he's healthy, his quarterback's healthy, he has big time ability. We've known that. He has the most vertical ability among the Packers pass catchers.
For sure. Just going to be super volatile on him. But obviously, I always like getting Christian Watson into lineups for the spike week potential. One small note, they did activate Marshawn Lloyd this week. He had that appendectomy situation. They let him go back on IR. Now they activated him again. So at least it seems like he's over the appendicitis situation. And he's just had such bad luck with injuries, or call it whatever you want, luck, or people saying he's not taking care of his body. I don't know anything about that either way, but either way, it's good to see him back. Rams. When Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp are both healthy, we know Stafford can have huge games. So, the Rams were on a short week. They go across the country for a 1 p.m. game in New England. Stafford goes off for 295 yards and 4 touchdowns, and it's mostly concentrated to Puka and Kupp. I didn't play a Stafford. I'm like, I should have a post-it note on my screen. Every time Puka and Kupp are both healthy, I want to play a Stafford double in DFS tournaments. Every time T and Chase are healthy, I want to play a Burrow double in DFS tournaments, and I just didn't do it. I was frustrated by that. But again, impressive performance here from Puka and Kupp. I thought, Evan, what do you think of Rams win in New England?
Yeah, it's funny. In the previous game, Puka and Kupp were out there too, but they didn't. It didn't happen for Stafford, but it certainly did here against a pretty formidable New England Patriots opponent in a pretty tough spot. But I'm with you. I mean, the vast majority of the time when you got Puka and Kupp out there, Stafford is playable in fantasy football. I played Kyron Williams in DFS, and he had a he played well in the game, but he had a disappointing result. He had 0 targets.
Yeah.
Ran 15 for 86. But yeah, that was a disappointing outcome for Kyron Williams.
Yeah, I mean, this is the knock that the Kyron Williams haters have on him, right? He's not explosive. He's not that athletic. He's averaging 3.9 yards per carry. And then when Puka and Kupp are healthy, it's hard to earn targets. And when Puka or Kupp are healthy, more of the touchdowns will come through the air versus the run. So I mean, those are the whole
during that time period where Kupp and Puka were out.
Yeah.
Kyron was just a lock every single week,
right.
to score a touchdown, if not multiple.
Right. So yeah, it's just different now. I mean, Stafford has 10 touchdown passes in his last 4 games now since these guys have gotten back and gotten healthy. It's just different. Vikings, it didn't look that great in the box score for Sam Darnold, but I actually thought he was very good in this game. Pretty easy win for them in Tennessee. Suspected that they would ease off Aaron Jones a little bit here in this game, and they did. Jones played 39 snaps, Cam Akers 27, Ty Chandler 1, as he has been completely iced here by Cam Akers. Evan, what do you think of Darnold, who had really been struggling coming into this game, but I thought played pretty well?
Yeah, and we were talking about how, we wanted to make sure that we were hoping that we wouldn't see Sam Darnold spiral because he has a history of doing that. And he lost an early fumble in this game, and he did not spiral. I was worried that might legitimately happen. It did not, and he wound up playing a really nice game. And the Vikings got it done against a pretty bad Titans team. But Jordan Addison had a monster 47-yard touchdown. Yeah. His targets on a weekly basis just are not where you want him to be, although he did have 8 in this game. But generally speaking, he's usually in the 4 to 5 range.
Yeah.
But he's made some plays recently on his opportunities.
For sure. Yeah, they're 8-2 now, play at the Bears this week as the Vikings continue their very impressive season. Saints. So the Saints roll over the Browns here easily behind Taysom Hill. I mean, I may never forget this game for the rest of my life. I talked about it on the solo pod. Taysom Hill had one of the most amazing fantasy games ever. 7 carries, 138 yards, 3 rushing touchdowns. He also threw a pass for an 18-yard completion, threw an interception. As a receiver, he was targeted 10 times, catches 8 balls for 50 yards, and he also lost a fumble. I mean, this was like the most full box score you could possibly have for an NFL player. And I talked about in the solo pod, man, like no Shaheed, no Olave, no Bub Means, no Kendra Miller, no Jamal Williams. They talked about it leading up to this game. Taysom Hill is like, besides Kamara, their best playmaker, and it's like, man, should have been higher on him. He came in at 1% with tight end eligibility, 1% in DFS, at least on FanDuel he did. Evan, what did you think of Saints' easy win over the Browns?
Yeah, I don't even know if there's anything to add. The guy's 34 years old.
Yeah.
It's wild. And I mean, like, he's outright running Browns defenders and trucking dudes. I mean, he had a 75-yard touchdown run.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have to double check that to make sure. MVS is their number 1 receiver, and their number 2 receiver is Kevin Austin Jr., a guy who went undrafted or was playing for the Birmingham Stallions earlier this year. So I guess good for them. The Saints are 4-7. Derek Carr's been playing great, though. I'll tell you that.
And I poo-pooed MVS a lot. I kind of warmed up to it late in the week and thought that he was reasonable to play on Sunday. It's just they have no one to throw to, and like MVS is going to be out there, and he's fast. Now we know he's not very good, and we know he's not great at earning targets. But man, if you're desperate at wide receiver, there's been so many wide receiver injuries. I could see it. I don't hate the MVS stuff if you're in a desperate spot at all.
It's also a reminder that like this offense can still be at very least competitive, if not outright explosive, when their offensive line is intact, and it's fully intact now. And even their right tackle, Trevor Penning, who has gotten a ton. I mean, I was wondering, Underhill has like wondered if he's going to be out of the league. He's actually been playing well. Brandon Thorne did a special on his website, a special article on how Trevor Penning is kicking ass in the running game. And I mean, that's the biggest question mark on the offensive line when they're all healthy, and they're all healthy right now.
Saints have a bye next. Then they play Rams, Giants, Commanders, Packers, Raiders to finish it out. 26 routes for MVS on 28 Derek Carr dropbacks here, by the way. Eagles. This was the Thursday night game against the Commanders. Jaden Daniels versus Jalen Hurts. It was billed but as what's been happening for the whole year, it was the Saquon show. Nearly 200 total yards and 2 touchdowns. On top of that, got tackled at like the 1-inch line, which of course led to yet another Jalen Hurts tush push. Evan, what do you think of Eagles win over the Commanders on Thursday?
Yeah, this is another offensive line that when they are intact, man, they will just block out the sun. And Jordan Mailata is back now. They're starting left tackle. I think all the other dudes are healthy. And they can do what they want. The Eagles have won 6 games in a row. They're playing so well defensively that they've been really, really run heavy over the last month plus.
Mm-hmm.
And that has benefited Saquon and kind of hurt the production of the pass catchers.
Yeah.
Because, A.J. Brown, it's been a little slow going for him. Devonta Smith has had some pretty quiet games. Jalen Hurts still gets there because he, runs in touchdowns. But it's kind of hurt the production of the pass catchers, how dominant the Eagles have been. I mean, people are out here saying that they think that the Eagles can win the Super Bowl, and the way that they've been playing for the last month and a half. I mean, I wouldn't argue with that.
Yeah. I think they're actually the second betting choice now to win the NFC behind only Detroit, but I'd have to double check that. To Evan's point, over the last 4 weeks, the Eagles are dead last in pass rate over expectation. Stone cold, dead last. And I think A.J. Brown's been playing great. I think Devontae's been fine, but when you drop back 20 times in a game, it's going to be hard to get there, man. And so they are being extremely run heavy right now. 49ers. Really bad loss for the 49ers in a home game to Seattle. They dropped to 5-5. Difficult schedule. Dog to make the playoffs now. Purdy with just 159 passing yards against this Seattle defense. McCaffrey's usage was great, but again, no explosive plays. Christian McCaffrey's longest gain in this game was 11 yards. That's not Christian McCaffrey. Now, they certainly missed George Kittle as a blocker in the receiving game, but still, this was an alarming loss, I thought, for the 49ers. Evan, what do you think of Purdy's performance in San Francisco?
Yeah, it was. I think it was a little bit alarming. I think that also Seattle's defense, they're in the first year of Mike McDonald, and they started off really, really slow. And I think that they've started to come on a little bit lately. So I think some credit goes to them. But the loss of George Kittle just cannot be overstated. The importance of him, because he is their most explosive pass catcher. And he also makes a big difference in the running game. And their running game here was not particularly effective, at least from a running back standpoint.
Yeah.
And Kittle's a stud run blocker. Speaking of Brandon Thorne, one of my favorite Brandon Thorne stories is when Doug Gottlieb came out and said that George Kittle can't block. And then Brandon Thorne put together a montage of George Kittle just kicking ass in the trenches. And then Rich Rebar had some on-off stats for George Kittle and the 49ers run game when he's in there. And he just makes a pronounced difference. It does sound like he's going to be back. Kyle Shanahan said he expects George Kittle to practice on Wednesday. Really good news for the 49ers offense.
100%. The best news for the 49ers is this Jawan Jennings stuff, man. I mean, we have to allow room for guys to get better once they're in the NFL, right? And I make this mistake too. Oh, this guy sucks. He's never gonna get better. Jawan Jennings has flat out gotten better. Dude is absolutely balling. His first read rate, his third down throw rate. I mean, it just shows how much they trust him. And on a week-to-week basis, I mean, you guys know I've been a long time Debo hater. I never thought the efficiency could sustain. It was just so wild what he was doing. But on a week-to-week basis now, I have no problem with saying Jennings is going to get just as many targets, if not more, than Debo Samuel. So any thoughts on that dynamic rest of season, Evan, the Pearsall, Jennings, Debo stuff?
Yeah, Pearsall was not a factor in this game. It's hard to fully digest that, even, but I mean, things can change in small sample size. It still feels like a small sample size to say that Jawan Jennings is ahead of Debo Samuel going forward. I don't feel comfortable saying that quite yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I always do the jokes when the backups come in for the guys, and I call them like 90% CMC or something like that. Jawan Jennings is like 110% Ayuk. I mean, he's doing things.
At least 2024 Ayuk.
Yeah, seriously. Yeah. I mean, seriously. Oh, by the way, Kyle Shanahan did say on Monday that Brock Purdy came out of this game with a sore shoulder. They're calling him day to day. It is his throwing shoulder. So I just want to keep an eye on that. At Packers, at Bills versus Bears next for the 49ers. Seahawks, really great win. I mean, they win it on a 13-yard Geno Smith rushing touchdown to cap off a game-winning drive. Fantasy story to me again was Jackson Smith-Njigba, who was really good late. Even with DK Metcalf back in the lineup, Jackson Smith-Njigba catches 10 balls for 110 yards on a 34% target share. ADOT, which we talked about so much with JSN, was up around 8.5 yards. That's totally fine. I mean, have to be super excited about JSN. If he finishes the stretch well, I could see him going in like the second, third round of fantasy drafts next year. Would not shock me at all. Evan, what do you think of Seahawks win in San Francisco?
Yeah, Seahawks that puts them at 5-5, which is firmly in the mix in the NFC West. Jackson Smith-Njigba over his last 3 games. Now there is some of this is with DK Metcalf out, so context is needed. But over his last 3 games, 23 catches on 31 targets, 74% catch rate, 359 yards, almost 12 yards per target, and a couple of touchdowns. Yeah, I think that we are seeing him make the second-year leap, and he is completely iced Tyler Lockett at this point. Tyler Lockett is really not a big factor in the offense anymore.
Right, that's the big thing. It's like, if it's going to be concentrated to Metcalf and JSN, and JSN's running deeper down the field than that 3 or 4 yard fraudulent stuff, then yeah, that's how you get really big JSN games. Home against the Cardinals next for Seattle. Bucks. Tampa was on a bye last week. Hopefully, they'll get Mike Evans back here for this Giants game on Sunday. Evan, any Bucks thoughts for you as they come out of the bye?
Yeah, that's obviously the big one. And then the other big one is Tristan Wirfs. They're like all-pro caliber left tackle, suffered an MCL injury before the bye. And it sounds optimistic on him, but he does matter. The Giants have some talent on the defensive line.
I just wanted to highlight one of the best fantasy playoff schedules you can find is the Bucks. Week 16, they get the Cowboys. Week 17, they get the Panthers at home. I mean, that's it, man. Last NFC team is the Washington football team, aka the Commanders. They had that big Thursday night game against the Eagles. Commanders managed just 10 points until garbage time. Nearly got an air ball from Terry McLaurin. And by the way, Quinyon Mitchell, we think that this cornerback wide receiver stuff is overblown and doesn't matter as much in terms of predictiveness as people think. But Quinyon Mitchell is balling for sure. Evan, what do you think of Commanders' performance in that Thursday game against the Eagles?
Well, this is where it hurts that Cliff Kingsbury doesn't move Terry McLaurin around because Quinyon Mitchell doesn't move around. It's not like Quinyon Mitchell shadowed him, but he ultimately did wind up shadowing him because McLaurin doesn't move around.
Right.
So Quinyon Mitchell was on McLaurin on 80% of his routes, and McLaurin, who has been great all year, is having a great season. He finished with one catch for 10 yards.
Yeah.
And I think that we've both complimented Cliff Kingsbury maybe more than we anticipated this season, but there is some data out there that shows that his offenses over the course of the season tend to not get better and maybe even sometimes get worse. We've seen the Washington offense get worse lately. That also has been in some circles attributed to Jaden Daniels' rib injury. But I mean, I think that there is maybe some potentially legitimate cause for concern regarding Washington. Now they face Dallas this week. So that can be your slump buster, and they got the mini bye.
Right.
So I'm going to stay upbeat on Jaden Daniels, but I mean, I think that there is some reason for concern there.
I think the rib thing is nobody really knows. What I do know is that the last two games, Jaden Daniels has not looked like the rusher he was earlier in the season. Last two games, just 10 carries for 23 yards and no touchdowns for Jaden Daniels. Now, 10 days off, and you get to face the Cowboys, get the ribs right. Seems like a nice bounce back spot here for Jaden Daniels. Let's get to the AFC now. We'll start with the Baltimore Ravens. They go to Pittsburgh for a big AFC North game here, and it turned ugly. And, this was always a risk when you get division rivals that are used to playing like smash mouth football. I know that the best way to beat the Ravens is through the air, but that's not really Arthur Smith, Russell Wilson's game. So it was ugly, I thought, for both Russell Wilson and Lamar Jackson. Lamar ends up with just 15.9 DraftKings points here, easily his lowest of the season. Evan, what do you think of Ravens game in Pittsburgh?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you summed it up perfectly. And I think that, when you have two quality pass rushes, and Pittsburgh in particular, they're just going to make life difficult on Lamar Jackson. And really, historically, the Steelers have done a really good job against Lamar Jackson. They did again in this game. I thought that Russell Wilson could have a little bit better game in this spot, and he did not because the Ravens have been such a pass funnel all season, and they're dealing with a bunch of injuries. By the way, on their defense going forward. We'll be talking about that in the matchups column. But yeah, I mean, it was a smash mouth game. The Ravens really should have won. Justin Tucker missed 2 field goals in the game. By the way, he's not having a great season. And the Steelers were able to pull it out.
Yeah, a lot of weird, bad field goal kicking this week. McPherson really hurt the Bengals. Tucker here. The other note that I have on the Ravens is that with Isaiah Likely back, you go back to Mark Andrews as like streamer only, right? He had 2 catches for 22 yards here. Obviously difficult spot for him. The other note that I had is it's been 3 weeks now since the Ravens traded for Deontay Johnson. He's run 15 routes on 94 dropbacks. It's just, I feel like the NFL does not like Deontay Johnson nearly as much as the public and the rest of us kind of do/did. So yeah, I mean, he's like their fourth receiver now.
Yeah, and this was like a revenge game too. They
Yep.
might have had some, impetus to play him a little bit more, and they didn't at all. He's got, I think, one catch as a Raven.
Yeah.
Yeah, one catch for 6 yards as a Raven.
Let's go to the Buffalo Bills. So massive AFC game here. Bills finally slay the Chiefs. No miracles this time. Bills move to 9-2. Chiefs are 9-1 in the battle for the AFC's number one seed. And Bills did it without Keon Coleman, without Dalton Kincaid. Amari Cooper was limited. You get the spike rushing games from Josh Allen in these big games, 12, 55, 1. And you get Khalil Shakir catching a bunch of short balls. And that was basically it. So impressive win for the Bills, but somewhat expected, I feel like. I mean, Bills were favored in this game. And I think the Bills are just as good as the Chiefs. I know that's people are going to say that's crazy, but Chiefs have gotten so lucky so many times. And I get that when you're good, you get lucky a lot, but ran out of luck here against the Bills. Evan, what do you think of Bills win?
Yeah, the Bills, as you mentioned, they were without Keon Coleman and Dalton Kincaid, and they were without their starting right tackle Spencer Brown, and they were still able to kind of handle Kansas City in this one. Now they go on their bye. I think that game, and I have not looked at the MVP odds in particular on Josh Allen lately. I got to think that put him.
He's the favorite. Yep.
Yeah, he's the favorite.
Yep. Pretty significantly now. Not that significantly. I mean, this stuff changes the top every week, but
Every week.
Lamar
Every
and
week.
and Josh
And now he
Allen.
goes on the bye, so he may lose some ground.
Yeah.
Just because he doesn't play a game.
Last note I had on the Bills was Dalton Kincaid missed this game. We talked a lot about Dawson Knox last week. Usage was great. Dawson Knox ran 37 routes on 45 Josh Allen dropbacks, saw a 15% target share. Sounds like Dalton Kincaid's injury is considered minor. Expect him back after the bye, but we'll see. Let's go to Cleveland. Jameis, man. Jameis for president. I mean, Jameis has got to be on the Mount Rushmore of my favorite fantasy players, Ty God Taylor, the God himself, Chris Godwin, Donald Parham, Jameis Winston. These are my favorite players in the NFL because all Jameis wants to do is throw. All he wants to do is throw it deep. All his teammates love him. I mean, there's video of him after the game, hugging and talking to all of the old Saints guys that he used to play with. And in this spot against a decimated Saints defense in a dome, no Marshawn Lattimore, just no surprise that Jameis goes off for 395 passing yards and 2 touchdowns, and the team loses the game. That's just kind of like Jameis's MO. Evan, what do you think of Browns game down there in New Orleans?
Yeah, and the Saints are the Browns are letting Jameis rip it.
Yeah.
I mean, he's averaging 45 pass attempts per game in 3 starts. We did not see the big Cedric Tillman game. In this one, he did finish with 8 targets. It was the Jerry Jeudy show. Jerry Jeudy, I had a stat entering this game. Jerry Jeudy had gone 25 straight games without going over 81 yards. And then in this game, he snaps that.
Yeah.
6 for 142 and a touchdown with an 89-yard TD.
Jameis
can be an elevator at times. And I mean, Jerry Jeudy has had a very disappointing career, but he did not have a disappointing game here.
Yeah. And I think I like Tillman the best out of these 3, but I think it's going to be somewhat random each week between Tillman and Jeudy, and then Elijah Moore, obviously, in the slot. Target share is going to be a little bit lower there. And Njoku is a great asset, too, as long as Jameis is starting. Along those lines, though, Evan, it's about to get way tougher for Jameis. Next 4 games for the Browns: Steelers, at Broncos, at Steelers, Chiefs. I cannot find or think of a worse 4-game stretch for passing games or offenses in general than that 4. Will Jameis Winston make it out of these 4, or will they go to DTR? And so I'm a little bit worried about the Browns stuff I have in best ball going into the playoffs because I'm just not sure that Jameis is even going to make it here to the fantasy playoffs before we get a look at DTR. But we'll see.
Last note, Jerome Ford played a ton in this game because of game script. And that could be an issue as they face these superior teams over the next month. I don't know if we're going to get to a point where we can use Nick Chubb with confidence.
Yep, agreed. Texans So, relatively easy win for the Texans in Dallas last night on Monday Night Football. Big story was great to see Nico Collins back. Very first play of the game, rips off a 77-yard touchdown called back by an ineligible man downfield. Nico did end up earning 7 targets here, team high, along with Tank Dell. However, he only ran 21 routes on 38 Stroud dropbacks, which surprised me because it felt like they were super cautious with this. Like Nico could have played in week 11, or I'm sorry, he could have played in week 10, and he didn't. I thought he was going to be full go, not on the injury report. He only ran like half the routes. Now, was it because he aggravated something? It didn't look like that to me. I guess they were just easing him back in. Evan, any thoughts on Nico Collins' return and any other Texan stuff?
Yeah, I mean, he was out for a month plus with a hamstring injury. What kind of condition is he in? You know, it's I got to think it's hard to keep up your conditioning with a hamstring injury, and he had a pretty severe one. You know, one so bad. He was out 5 weeks. I think
Yeah.
they had to put him on IR with a hamstring injury. So I think in hindsight, it's not that surprising. God, I had an FFPC team that went in. We needed 30 from Stroud and Nico Collins and didn't even come close. And that 77-yard touchdown, having that erased. And then Nico Collins also had a 26-yard catch overturned on replay. And Joe Mixon just stole all the scoring.
Joe Mixon is
So,
fantasy's number 1 running back right now in points per
oh
game.
my God.
In points
You
per
know, he
game.
looks great. I mean, he looks like he lost weight. He's been ripping long runs. He came back from that high ankle sprain early in the year. I also noticed that they've reconfigured their interior offensive line. They've had major offensive line issues, and they reconfigured their interior. And I mean, they were opening big holes. Now this was against Dallas, who does not have a great run defense whatsoever. But I like to see that little improvement from the O line.
One thing we talked about last week on the Texans was would they stick John Mechie as their main slot guy? In this game, they did. John Mechie, 27 routes on 38 Stroud dropbacks. That was just behind Tank Dell, who led the way with 30. As I said, Nico 21. And then you go down to Hutchinson 15 and Robert Woods 8. So a notable change there, getting John Mechie, I think, into the 3 wide receiver set for the Texans. Texans are one of those teams with a week 14 bye, by the way. So keep that in mind. Jaguars. So I thought that Doug Peterson would be gone before we recorded this show. It was so absurd. Like Sunday morning, some report comes out that Doug Peterson's coaching for his job. You know, like, listen, man, you have Mac Jones and a bunch of dust balls against the best team in the NFL. What do you think was going to happen? It's not Doug Peterson. Now, this game might not be. Doug Peterson's done a terrible job, I think. This game was not Doug Peterson's fault. They had absolutely no prayer against the Lions, obviously. But before you guys listen to this, Doug Peterson could end up being fired. Seems like the writing is very much on the wall here. Evan, what do you think of the Peterson situation and Jaguars' latest embarrassment this time to the Lions?
Yeah, I mean the Jaguars are just like they're terrible. So there's not even really a whole lot to say. Tank Bigsby was out, and Etienne, who by the way, you want to talk about players that have had terrible seasons. Travis Etienne has been horrible for a guy who was a top 5 fantasy RB last year.
Yeah,
he's been a huge bust. He had the backfield to himself and did nothing. Gabe Davis is out for the year with torn meniscus. Christian Kirk is already out for the year with a broken collarbone. You know, there's no light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah. The one thing you can say is that with all these injuries, in theory, and they should be trailing, and there's been a lot of injuries, in theory, it should be really good for Brian Thomas Jr. and Evan Ingram. In reality, I don't know, man. Mac Jones seems like incapable here of making big plays, but, you know, we'll see. Let me just check Jaguars' schedule real quick because I do think it matters. Like, Mac Jones is going to be super sensitive to matchups. Yeah, they have a home game. They have bye, and then home game against the Texans, at Titans, versus Jets. Not great. Not great on the Jaguars stuff. Chiefs. Finally, the Chiefs go down at the hands of the Bills. Patrick Mahomes throws 2 picks, takes 2 sacks. They finally lose. Best news, I thought, for the Chiefs in this game was Xavier Worthy came alive. He did again have one of those long plays where he didn't know where he was on the field and kind of caught it out of bounds, but otherwise thought he was pretty good. Evan, what do you think of Chiefs' loss up in Buffalo?
Yeah, I thought that he was Xavier Worthy. That is, was clearly a bigger part of the game plan, which I don't think that I would have guessed that that would happen based on his recent production, especially in a game like this. But I mean, he showed that he's not, you know, completely useless. Other than like running clear out routes and that sort of thing. He went 4 for 61 and a touchdown on 5 targets. DeAndre Hopkins is still not running the full. He's not getting full route participation.
Yeah.
I got to think that that's coming at some point. Noah Gray scored a couple touchdowns. It was, put up 21 against a good defense, and they lost the game.
Yeah. I mean, Mark noted on Twitter, DeAndre Hopkins' route rate actually went down in this game. And for such a big game, like this game could decide the AFC's #1 seed. I was shocked that they didn't expand DeAndre Hopkins and actually brought him down. So, that was a bit confusing for me. Other note, Isaiah Pacheco might be back this week. We're going to start with him projected out, but I think at the latest sounds like week 13, week 14 for Pacheco at the absolute latest. He'll be back. Let's go to Vegas. They go to Miami. They lose Alexander Madison and Zamir White to injury. They lose the game 34-19. They fall to 2-8. Disappointing Jacoby Myers game here, just 4-28-0 on 14% of the targets. But that's because it was a Brock Bowers absolute alpha game. 16 targets for Brock Bowers, 37% of the targets. So as we've been talking about ever since Devontae has been gone, I don't know exactly how it's going to go, but each week they're so likely combined for 50+% of the targets. This week it was Brock Bowers going absolutely nuts. Evan, what do you think of Raiders game in Miami?
Yeah, I mean, Brock Bowers is like already the best tight end in the NFL. I mean, it's incredible. It's not surprising he won the Mackey Award twice. The only other note that I had was the running back situation. Alexander Madison and Zamir White. Under the new play caller, they came in using Zamir White as the #1 back. He got hurt. Alexander Madison got hurt. Not a whole lot interesting. We can talk about Jacoby Myers and Brock Bowers every week. That's about it when it comes to the Raiders.
Yeah, they do have Amir Abdullah and Dylan Lobby. You talked to Dago a little bit about that spot on the waiver show. Brock Bowers is on pace to shatter like every tight end rookie record, but also almost all rookie wide receiver seasons. I mean, other than Puka, this might be the best rookie pass catching season ever. Bowers is on pace for 119 catches and 1,200 yards. He's still 25-1 to win Rookie of the Year because Jaden Daniels and Bo Nix have been so good. I would vote for Jaden Daniels for sure over Brock Bowers, but man, I don't want to overshadow Bowers' season here.
I'll tell you what, Jaden Daniels has been coming down though.
Yeah.
I looked at this this morning, and Jaden Daniels is all the way. I mean, he was at like some ridiculous number.
Yeah.
A month ago, and now he's down at -400. Bo Nix is 3-1.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I think Bowers is a decent shot at 20-1.
Yeah. By the way, they already announced that Gardner Minshew will start again. Home game, difficult spot here against the Broncos coming up for the Raiders. Let's go to the Chargers. This first half of that Sunday night game that Justin Herbert played, I mean, Collinsworth was like, full pants tent. I mean, this guy was absolutely shredding. He was in the zone in the first half. Second half, he kind of cooled off, needed some late heroics to Ladd McConkey to get the win. Chargers go to 7-3. Evan, what do you think of Chargers' big win on Sunday Night Football over the Bengals?
Yeah, it was a huge win. Speaking of longer shots to win awards, Justin Herbert 20-1 to win MVP. I think at the end of the day, he's probably not going to have the statistics, but man, he's been having a really, really good season, even without monster stats. Gus Edwards, who played a lot in the previous game, barely played in the second half of this game, and Jim Harbaugh was asked afterwards what happened to Gus Edwards, and they're like, J.K. Dobbins was running real well, and I mean J.K. Dobbins is just way better than Gus Edwards at this stage of their careers. Another nice rushing game for Justin Herbert, which we talked about had kind of become more of a recurring theme since the first month or so of the season. He finished with 5 for 65 as a runner. I mean, I think that that's going to be a part of their offense somewhat bankable part of their offense the rest of the way.
Um, yeah. The Dobbins stuff is so tough for me. I would also note that they used Hassan Haskins at the goal line. Did you notice that? Like, and that's the second straight week they've used Hassan Haskins at the goal line, and they're mixing in Gus some, as Evan said. And I know Dobbins ended up with a big game here, but yeah. I should note, if you listen to the broadcast, Melissa Stark said that it is one of J.K. Dobbins' goals to get comeback player of the year. If they get into spots like Jim Harbaugh, I could see him getting J.K. Dobbins stats late in the year to try to win him
Absolutely.
this award.
Do we know what his odds are right now?
He's one of the favorites. We talked about him on the award show a bunch. I like he was like 10-1, 12-1 for a while. I saw some 4-1, 5-1 lately. I didn't check it this week.
Okay.
Yeah. Let's go to Miami. I mean, Dolphins had to play well offensively here, and they did. Home game against the Raiders. This was a spot for them to show their ceiling. Tua shows it. 28 of 36, 288 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Much of it to Jonnu Smith, who quietly is averaging 6.5 targets per game over his last 6, which has really, really hurt Jalen Waddle and even Tyreek Hill to some degree. But regardless, good to see the pass game get going here. Evan, what do you think of Dolphins win over the Raiders?
Yeah, the big note that I had is that Jalen Wright remains, and Jalen Wright didn't really do anything in this game, but he remains ahead of Raheem Mostert, who got hurt at one point, suffered a hip injury, but Devon Achane remains the clear cut number one running back in Miami. Yeah, Jonnu Smith has quietly become a guy that, and I know that he just had a big game. The recency bias feels strong right now, but I mean he had a bunch of decent games leading up to this. He's become a pretty big part of their offense.
Okay. Let's go to yeah. Achane also scored from the goal line, which I thought was really important. We know the pass game role also. Jalen Waddle has only seen 26 targets in the 6 games started by Tua this year. My God, man. He's getting out targeted badly by Jonnu and Achane. Badly. And they just gave him $84 million extension.
Yeah, and like a ton of it guaranteed.
76 million guaranteed. Crazy. New England. I thought Drake May was actually pretty good here. The wide receiver rotation remains tough. All we know for sure is that Kayshon Boutte has run a route on 100% or over 90% of dropbacks in 3 straight games. But Kendrick Bourne went from not playing to being like the star of this game for the Patriots. Evan, what do you think of Drake May and New England here in their loss to the Rams?
Just said, I'm real impressed every single week with Drake May. I mean, I think that he is already elevating the talent around him, and he's really good as a runner, and he's tough as nails, and just really impressed with him. I mean, he's like a borderline fantasy starter.
Yeah, he's another one that's on waivers, man. Like in some of these 12-team leagues, Anthony Richardson's out there, Drake May is out there, Geno Smith is out there. I mean, there's a lot of options if you're in a 1 quarterback league for streamers. Hunter Henry actually has a pass catching ceiling, right? And he's kind of like the focal point of the offense. The floor is still low because he plays for the Patriots and he's a tight end. But to me, Hunter Henry is in a different tier than the touchdown or bust tight ends. Like Hunter Henry can actually catch 5, 7, 9 balls in a game where you're not going to get that from, like the Disley, Dawson Knox types. Jets. I mean, we talked about this on Friday. I know Video Team made a clip out of it. Again, the Jets were favored. They were favored by 4 points this time. And again, the Jets lose to fall to 3-8. And so, it just, the markets continue to overrate this Jets team. They are just an absolute mess and a mess defensively too. Evan, what do you think of Jets' latest embarrassment, this time losing at home to Anthony Richardson?
Yeah, and right before this show, the Jets just fired their GM.
Yeah.
So, they're headed for another teardown, and
Yeah.
at least we got to see Breece Hall, that he still has it in him to have a really, really nice game, but obviously it's been just an incredibly disappointing season across the board.
Yeah, Joe Douglas is out. Phil Savage is in as the GM here. Breece outsnapped Braylon 44-9 in this game. And we've been talking about how Breece has been running bad. It's not his fault. he's still an incredible fantasy asset and really good to see him pay it off here. Mercifully, finally, Jets are on a bye. I mean, I'm so sick of watching the Jets and talking about the Jets. They're on a bye this week. They do get Jacksonville in week 15 and the Rams in week 16. So I don't want to give up on them as fantasy assets, but team total needs to adjust. Team total needs to adjust. Otherwise, these are going to be guys are going to look over projected on a weekly basis. Let's go to the Steelers. Really good win for Pittsburgh over the rival Ravens. Mike Tomlin now the favorite to be coach of the year. Steelers did it mostly with defense. I mean, they didn't score an offensive touchdown in this entire game. Chris Boswell kicked 6 field goals. Did think it was a really good spot for George Pickens, and he played well. Did not get into the box, though. Evan, what did you think of Steelers' win over the Ravens?
Still waiting for Mike Williams to take a step up in terms of his playing time. He did from his first game with Pittsburgh, but he has not jumped into that number 2 role yet. Darnell Washington had 2 catches for 42 yards. He has out-targeted Pat Freiermuth since Russell Wilson took over at quarterback. I actually think that Pat Freiermuth is a drop. And, Arthur Smith has always had this tendency to kind of get weird with tight ends. Darnell Washington is out targeting him.
Yeah. I thought it was good to see Jaylen Warren shake off injury the week 10. He was injured in week 11. He was injured in week 10 and fumbled in week 10. He got 13 touches here, turned it into 68 total yards. That was good to see on Jaylen Warren. As Evan said, the Big Mike role has not been expanding too rapidly. Only 15 routes here for Big Mike Williams on 41 dropbacks. Would love to see that get higher. Last team is the Tennessee Titans. Was always going to be a tough spot here, right? Like error-prone Will Levis against the complicated Brian Flores defense. Levis takes 5 sacks, throws an interception. The run game is inept. They lose 23-13. Not too surprising whatsoever. Evan, what do you think of Titans' loss here?
Pretty predictable outcome. Now they get the Texans, who can really rush the passer. The Titans have major offensive line problems, and the Will Levis holding the ball in the pocket problem. So Texans will be a fun defense to play this week. I really don't think that you can rely on Nick Westbrook-Akine, but this guy seems to score a touchdown every single week.
I know. It's crazy. Calvin Ridley continues to play well. I mean, I know it wasn't huge in the box score here, but 458-0 in a game where Tennessee struggled so bad, I think it's totally reasonable. Tajay Spears is in the concussion protocol. Could lead to a full Tony Pollard workhorse role against the Texans here in week 12. All right. That is going to do it for this edition of the Team by Team show. You guys should all be watching this on YouTube, where we have tickers, highlights, tons of graphics cooked up by the YouTube team. Be sure to check that out on YouTube. Hit the subscribe button there. We'll also have some free content special for Thanksgiving on the YouTube machine. Check that out as well. For Evan, producer Luke, producer Ryan, I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.